Hi everyone, welcome back to JavaScript 101, and in this video I'm going to be talking about functions. So you've written a script and you've realized that you have a few lines that you're repeating over and over again, and you might think that it is fine, the program is just running and there are no errors. But an important thing a programmer has to do is something called abstraction. So abstraction is just removing complexities from your code, make it a little bit more organized, and if your code base grows, it will be easily maintainable. So one way to achieve abstraction is creating functions. So I'm going to show you how to create a function in JavaScript. So to create a function in JavaScript, you can use the function keyword here, and then you have to name your function. I'm going to create a function called say hello, and you follow it by a parentheses and then a curly brace block here, and in this block is what you want your function to do. So I'm just going to log the text hello, and there you have it. We've created our first function here. So if we run this script here now, we don't get anything from the console here, and that's because we have created a function but we have not used it. So to use a function, we have to do something called a function call. So to do a function call, just reference the name of the function, and then you have a parentheses, and that is your function call here. So when you run this, you get hello, and now we've created a function and we've used our function here. So the next thing I want to show you is how does functions interact with variables. So now I'm going to create a variable called name, and I'm just going to give it a value of Tim, and then I'm going to change this log message here, and I'm going to say hello to the name variable that we have created here. And now I'm going to log the variable name as well, and I'm going to run this code here, and as you can see here, it says hello Tim, just like we've written here, but we get an reference error, name is not defined, because the name variable is declared inside the function, making it a local variable, which means only anything that is inside this function here has access to this name variable here. So any objects like this console log statement here does not have access to it. So if you want everything outside the function to have access to that name variable as well, just remove it and put it outside. So now it is no longer a local variable, it is now a global variable. So this console log has access to it, and if we run this here now, it says hello Tim and Tim. So now that this function has access to that name global variable here, it can also modify its value here. You can modify the value from inside the function here. I'm going to change it. I'm going to say hello Mark here. The name has a value of Mark. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to console log the name value here before the function call. And when I run this, and as you can see here, it says Tim, hello Mark, and Mark, because the value at first is Tim, and then you did the function call, it says hello Mark, and it has changed the name variable value here to Mark. So once you log this name variable again, it will give you a value of Mark. And you have to be a bit careful with this. If this is not your intention to change this value forever, then it's best that maybe you stick with a local variable. Maybe you can just create a local variable and use the same identifier. It doesn't matter. JavaScript can actually distinguish between a global and local variable here. So if we create a local variable, when we run this again, it says Tim, hello Mark, and Tim, because the global variable has not changed. Okay, so now we have this function, and it pretty much just does one thing. It just says hello Mark. But you might want a function that has a little bit more flexibility. So maybe you want to say hello to someone else. The way you can do this is by introducing what we call a function parameter. So we can remove this variable here, and instead we put the name identifier in this parentheses here. Now we have given this function a parameter. So what this means is whenever you call the say hello function, you can actually provide a value here. So now I can say hello to Peter here. If I run this, it says hello Peter. I can say hello to Mary, and this will change to hello Mary. So you can actually change the output here based on the input of the function here. So that is your function parameter. Okay, so now that we know that functions have the ability to execute statements here, that is actually not the only ability the function has. So I'm going to show you something. I'm going to log the function call, and I'm going to run this here, and it still says hello Mary, but it gives a value of undefined because this function has no value. But the thing is, a function can actually give you a value. So I'm going to show you this by creating another function, and I'm going to call it isEven. And what this function I want it to do is to take a number and tell me whether it is an even number. And to do this, you can use the return keyword here, basically creating a return statement. And then we have a number input there, modulus 2, and we can check if it is 0. So if it is 0, it'll give me a true Boolean value because the number is an even number. So now when we log isEven, and I'm going to give in an input of 5. If we run this here now, we get false. If we give an even number as an input, it will be true here. So that's how we return a value from a function here. Okay, you can also put it into a variable. Let's say you have a variable called num, just a random number here, and then you can have another variable that says num isEven that stores that Boolean value. You can say isEven num, then let's just console log that num is even, and then when we run this now, it says true because num is true, and num is an even number. Okay, so now that we've shown you what a function can do, I'm going to show you a second way to create a function. Okay, so to create a function, the second way, you can create a variable. I'm going to create a variable called say goodbye, and I'm going to assign it a function, but I'm going to omit the name this time. So this way is what we call a function expression, and the first way is what we call a function declaration here. So basically we create a function that does a console log, and then we say goodbye. And now I'm going to call the say hello function here, and I'm going to call the say goodbye function here. And when we run this here, okay, so it says hello undefined. Okay, so now if you omit your parameter here in the say hello name here, it will give you an undefined value. And if you want to avoid that, what you can do is you can give a default value here. So I can just put an equal sign and put team there. So that is your default parameter here. So when we run this now, it says hello team, even though we don't put any value here. So okay, we've called these two functions here, and they work just the same way here. So why then do we have the second way of creating a function? Actually, these two ways of creating a function, they actually behave a little bit differently in JavaScript. So to show you this, I'm going to just take these two function calls here, and I'm going to put it right before all the function creations here. And I'm going to run this here now. And as you can see, we still get the hello team from the first function, say hello, but we get an error from the second function. And that's because the way JavaScript works, that before they execute any statements in this script here, what it does is it looks for function declarations. And when it sees these function declarations, it will create a variable Like for instance, this say hello function here will create a variable called say hello, and it will assign this function that we have created here. And the same thing goes for this is even here. So when this JavaScript code is running through, once it gets to the line 4, say hello already exists. So that's why it is able to call this say hello function. Whereas the second way, which is the function expression way, is not created when we come across this say goodbye call here, because there's no say goodbye function created at this line 5. That's why you get this reference error here. So okay, this function declaration, you can do it both ways. You can call it before, you can call it after. Then when do we actually use this function expression here? There's actually one use case for it, and I'm going to show you this now. And I'm just going to remove all this code here, and then I'm going to put a string that says use strict. And what this does is it puts JavaScript in a strict mode, and it just gives a few more rules that you have to code in, but I won't get into that in this video. It's just to show you when should you use the function expression here. So I'm going to create a variable called age, and I'm going to assign it a value of 18, and I'm going to create an if-else statement here. I'm going to say if age is greater than and or equal 18, then I'm going to create a function using the function declaration. And I'm going to create a function called greet, and I'm just going to do a simple function that says console log welcome, and the else statement will also have a function declaration, and I will log the value go home. So these are the two functions I've created in an if-else statement, and when I call this now and I run this, it gives me a reference error here. It says greet is not defined, because in strict mode, when you have a function declaration here, it is only available inside this if statement here or this else statement here. So if I call the greet inside, then it will give me a welcome, this output here. But if you want to actually call the function outside, then this is when you use the function expression. So I'm going to create a variable called greet, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign it to a function. I'm going to assign the function to this variable greet, and the same thing goes for the else statement. So now when we run this here, we actually get the value we want here. So now greet, the function called outside the if else statement, works. And if I change this value, I'm going to say 15. If I run here, it will say go home. So that's when you can use the function expression here. If not, I think it's best you just stick with the function declaration. Okay. So the last thing I want to show you is another way to create a function. Yes, there's another way to create a function, and this is what we call creating arrow functions. And so I'm just going to show you that quickly here. I'm going to create a variable called func. So arrow functions are just like your function expressions, but a little bit shorter. So you create a variable, you assign this arrow function, which is just a parentheses, an equal sign, and a greater sign. And then depending on how your function is constructed, if you have a single line, you can just put the single line here. And for example, you have a console log, and you can just call the function the same way here. And if you run this now, you get hello here. So that's how you create an arrow body function. It can even return a value here. So if you have an input, maybe you have A and B, and you want to return A plus B here, so you don't need to use the return keyword there. You can just console log the function and give it an input here. And if you run this, you gives is 387. So that's how you return a value here. If your function has like multiple lines here, you can just use the curly brace. So now we have a console log here. There's another line. And if you want to return a value, you have to use the return keyword in this instance here. When we run this now, okay, we get the output hello and the return value here. So okay, this comes to the end of this video and also the end of the JavaScript 101 series here. And I hope you enjoyed all the videos that is in this series and you have a better understanding in JavaScript. So if you did enjoy it, please give a like, subscribe and hit the bell for your notifications and stay tuned for new videos coming up.